Teaching is a challenging vocation which requires a strong knowledge of your content area, being aware of different learning needs of students, and also having strategies for the numerous challenging behavioural situations that may occur in the classroom during your teaching career. For this hurdle task, I was assigned scenario 11. It includes Brad, a Year 7 student who I have only had the opportunity to teach so far for 1 week. He is a bright student who seems to work well in class and is popular with the other students. Other teachers, though, have explained that Brad doesn't take responsibility if he has done something wrong or makes a mistake. During a visit to the bathroom in class time, I have witnessed Brad approach the bags of the neighbouring classroom, take out one of the lunch boxes, toss the contents on the ground, and stomp on the food before resuming his seat in my classroom as if nothing has happened. I decided to look at 2 different theories as a way that this situation could be approached: the responsible thinking process and assertive discipline. I have decided to start with the responsible thinking process, or RTP, created by Ed Ford. RTP recognises that students are human beings with their own goals, attitudes, and wants, and that they try to construct their world and their behaviours around achieving these things. According to this theory, there are rules for everything and every situation, and if you misbehave, you disregard these rules or act in a way that violates the rights of others in that environment. The goal of using the process is for students to look within themselves internally so they can begin to realise where they have gone wrong and have a say in how they can begin to improve and attempt to behave in a way that is respectful to both themselves and others around them. When this occurs, the RTP process recommends the use of questions in order to help the student realise that you have identified their behaviour, but also gets them to think about what they have done and if this is how they want to be acting. For the situation with Brad, I think the RTP process could be used to try and get him to recognise what he was doing, since it seems that in previous situations he has refused to take responsibility for his misbehaviour. As Brad has already come back inside the room, the best choice would be to set the class up with an activity. Ask Brad to step outside with you, and also ask him what he was doing out by the bags near the other classroom, and then continue going through the RTP question process. As the theory highlights, do not be judgmental with Brad, as respect may be lost. The questions should be calmly asked in a neutral tone so that Brad takes responsibility for his actions and realises that if this were to happen again, there may be further action that needs to be taken. If Brad were to avoid taking responsibility for his actions and say that he didn't do it, then it may be necessary to have him go to the responsible thinking classroom. The Responsible Thinking Classroom, or RTC, is generally used for children who continue to break the rules or who don't cooperatively answer the question process that is posed by the teacher. The idea of the Responsible Thinking Classroom is that the students will have to go to this space and use the time to form a plan about how they are going to work on their behaviour and negotiate with their teacher to come back to the classroom. This process should not be forced, and the work they do on this plan should come in the student's own time. In Brad's case, the need is to try and get him to take responsibility for his actions and realise that his behaviour has violated the rights of someone else. He will need to come up with a plan as to why he should be able to come back to class and how he will begin to act in a way that is respectful to his peers. Since it seems that Brad is a bright boy who enjoys his lessons and has positive relationships with most of the other students, the hope is that coming back to class will be something that motivates him to create his plan sooner rather than later. The next theory I chose to look at was assertive discipline, devised by Lee and Marlene Cantor, which is more an authoritarian approach which requires a teacher-centered approach to discipline. It involves the teacher having clear rules that are expressed and understood by students as the standard of behaviour. If students obey these rules and act responsibly, then positive reinforcement should be given. However, if rules are broken, teachers need to follow through on this and enforce negative consequences. There are 6 corrective strategies that they advise you to use in the application of this theory. As an effective teacher, you should, from the very beginning, be trying to establish positive relationships with your students, where you get to know their interests and learning needs. Rules should also be established from the beginning, and these need to be clear so that students are aware of the behaviour they are to exhibit. In the scenario given, Brad's behaviour has been tracked and noted by the teacher, and now it needs to be dealt with. As the teacher, I would want to talk to Brad in private about what has happened and what he has to say for himself. My next step would be to ask Brad to clean up the mess he made. As there may be other factors that influenced his actions, the situation may require further follow-up with the year coordinator and the other student who has had their lunch stomped on. Brad should have to apologise for his actions towards the other student, and depending on the school's discipline process, he may have to spend some time in detention after school or during break time. Brad's parents should also be informed of the situation, because going into another student's bag and ruining the lunch provided to that student is a rather serious issue that both sets of parents should be made aware of. They should also be advised of the actions that have been taken to deal with the behaviour that has occurred. While I like the idea behind the responsible thinking process and the way that it has students really account for their actions, I do question its ability to be applied for various situations. While I would like to take an approach that has the students think about what they have done, I feel that in the scenario provided, there are quite a few serious factors to consider, and that it may require a more assertive approach with negative consequences for the student to face. However, I think like learning styles and adapting for different students' needs, these serious behavioural situations sometimes require different approaches. As a pre-service teacher, I realise I will need to devise my own pedagogical approach to teaching and also carefully consider the various behavioural strategies that I will be able to enforce within my classroom. Thank you for listening to my presentation.